Hi there, so in the previous session we looked at the brush tool and started creating our own sort of textures and creating the background and some, well, more not the background but the foreground background elements and the foreground elements with the trees and the leaves. So today we're going to be continuing that. You may have noticed I've changed tutorial 4, that's because in the last one the overall product wasn't really what I was hoping for, so we've changed that. So just as a reminder, we are working to this colour scheme, which is split analogous. Obviously we don't want to exceed too far away from these, but we are going to deviate somewhat slightly today. Okay, so I'm going to show you where I'm at now in terms of the production, but this will be covered over the next couple of tutorials, but I would just like to give you a flavour of where I'm at in terms of the production. So there you go. As you can see, I've sort of extended this all right out. I've started to add these other details in. Really started focusing on the overall atmosphere with the piece at this bottom of the forest, and today we're going to extend what we've been doing with the brushes, okay, and we are going to look at painting some of these background elements, and obviously these trees, these parts at the front, and then we're going to take a look at this week's main focus, which is the pen tool. Okay, so where do we begin? The first thing we're going to do is zoom in, Control plus, and today we're just going to focus on this area. Similar to before, I'm not going to be focusing on the whole image because it would take far too long. So in the foreground we have our trees, which are all in there nicely, and then we have our individual parts, okay, which are pretty, pretty decent, but we want to create this sense of depth, this idea that this forest extends for miles and miles and miles, and also acts as a sort of in between in that depth. Okay, so first thing we are going to do is start planning out sort of ground where we're going to draw up from. Okay, so obviously with our brush, we're still working with the brushes. We're just going to grab just a solid sort of block colour. And what size are we looking at here? Okay, so it's not letting me see because I haven't got a layer selected, so we'll create a new folder and we'll just call this tree background, and then we'll create a new folder in here, and then we'll call this base leaves BG for background. Okay, we're going to drag this and put this into just behind, obviously in front of the mountains, but behind these trees. Okay, we're going to hide the trees, but we will need the ground, so we'll tell you what, we'll put this inside this folder as well. That way we should be able to nicely navigate between the trees and the leaves. So what we need to do is start to paint down where we need to draw our trees. So we're going to go in the colour palette, we're just going to get the red that we're used to working with now, and then we're going to start painting this sort of background area on. Okay, we don't want to go too far back, but we do want to get a nice coverage, a bit of deviation in the shape, and you can just sort of extend that all the way around. Okay, I think I'm going to probably make this a little bit shorter. So here we go again, just Control Z to undo, and we're just going to start to take that off and trim that down slightly. Obviously I realise you'll be working with a mouse, so it may take a little bit longer. As ever, I do recommend you get a graphics tablet. You can get them for relatively cheap now. Just going to paint back over that bit slightly. Okay, so with this we want to paint on our trees. If you can remember before, we used the calligraphy brush set, which I don't think I have selected here. So we're going to select the calligraphy brushes, and we're not going to append anything this time. There's a couple of things in addition that I want to show you. So we can take our brush, with the 60, and there we have it. So last time we turned on shape dynamics, we turned on scattering, and we turned on colour dynamics. In shape dynamics, I think we had an angle jitter, just to sort of bring that round. We didn't have a roundness. Definitely extended our minimum diameter. We sort of had a bit of a size deviation just to bring it up a little bit. And our scatter again. No, we don't want to keep it too intense. But yeah, so this is what we did to sort of create the ground. Today, however, we want to make some trees. And obviously we don't want to make them that big, they're in a distance, so the leaves need to be a little much smaller than what we have in our foreground. So we're going to take the brush size, take that down to about 10, okay, about there, and we'll see what that looks like. There we go. It looks like they're much further away now because the scale is much smaller in terms of the actual marks. So as ever, we're going to add some colours to our palette. Okay, so we know we're working with red, but if we take a look at our split analogus, we're also going to need to add a bit of variation. Okay, so we're going to pick some yellows, some pinks, and probably some maybe oranges. I think probably use these three because we've used the purple and we've used red and we haven't used these two. Okay, so what we're going to do is quickly on our palette just paint out 3 of those colours that we want to use. Okay, so we'll just pick out a sort of nice sort of vibrant yellow, and then we'll just quickly turn off these edits for the time being so we can get a block colour. Okay, and then we're going to go back and we're going to select a pink, just something nice and vibrant again, and then finally we're going to pick an orange as well. So let's just really get in there, sort of big, nice, vibrant, rich orange. Okay, so essentially we're going to use the same techniques as last time for the ground, but with these colours. Okay, so obviously with the orange selected, we are getting, a slightly similar tone, but again slightly different. Okay, and these will build up and actually look very different. So just undo that. So what we're going to do is create where's folder working on ground? No, where's our folder? Background, tree background, and then we're going to go to make a new layer, and we're going to call this. Sorry, delete that. We're going to call this one trees, and we're going to go yellow. We're going to do yellow first. I think that's going to give us the most variation. So if we go ahead, select our yellow colour, click OK with the colour picker, and literally what we're going to do is follow this sort of line around, creating some edges. Now we want to do this behind the tree because remember we're going to have a parallax background, which means that things are going to move. We need to see what's behind those trees. Okay, we can just hide our avatar for now, and you can make these as big as you want. And I'm not going to do all the way along because we literally just don't have the time in terms of keeping the length of the tutorial down. Okay, so let's do that and do that last sort of big curve. We can't, so just do it again really quickly. Okay, cool. So you can do any sort of tree pattern you want. You don't have to stick with circles. You can go for a more sort of Christmassy tree look. You can go for a much more sort of patchy if you want to take some more time filling in the twigs. Having a sort of patchy tree look going on with the sort of arms coming underneath. Yeah, but it's up to you. But I quite like the round ones. They fill in quite easily, and it's a time-saving process there. So once we've got sort of our 3 yellow ones, we'll create a new layer. We'll put this underneath because they're going to be behind slightly, and we'll call this one tree, and we'll call this orange, and we'll start adding those orange. Okay, so again we can just get that, and we can just start doing some circles really quickly. Again, these leaves need to look as though they developed these ones as when they're dying off. So it's really important we do sort of select, you select colours that are relevant to your theme that you have on. And I also recommend just maybe making some a little bit taller just to create a little bit more depth. Okay, and again we can just add another one over here really quickly. Okay, Then what we're going to do is finally make a new layer, and we're going to call this one tree pink, and we're going to grab the colour picker again. That's not colour picker. I'm going to click this, sorry, and then we're good to go again. Go back to brush tool, and this time we're going to add these in. So we've already created some nice sort of depth, you know, a nice block in there that's going to act as though we have our own tree system. Obviously this can be quite a lot bigger. We can have one that's maybe a little bit more dominant than the others in there. Okay, and obviously we can always create, we can just throw in another, go back to our yellow layer and fill in this empty space in the middle, and there we go. Yep, we're on the yellow layer, good. Okay, so the next thing we want to consider is just sort of check whereabout we are in terms of our tree. Our tree is in there. Cool. So we may need to lower these layers slightly as we've gone a bit too far up. So select the folder, select the select tool, and if you push down on the down key on the keyboard, you should be able to bring that bit down. And then obviously we need to just bring this layer back up. Okay. So cool. So we've got a much more sort of even feel to this now. So the next stage that we want to do is add in these background leaves. Okay, so we're just going to quickly hide these trees again. I need the whole folder, and what we want to do is add the colours on the top. It doesn't matter too much if the colours overlap, because we're going to add some shadow onto these to create depth, but by the same, we don't want them to be right behind the same colours, because then it's just going to look a little weird. So we can put these folders in a new one, and we'll call this trees, well, background trees front, and then we'll create a new folder and call this one background trees. In fact, go BG, sorry, just saves on the file size name if we put acronyms, so background trees and back, just so we know it's behind those ones. So on this one we are going to paint again with yellow, create a new layer, and this time we're just going to do green in the back. We're not going to do full circles, but we do want to get the impression that those trees are behind. Okay, so we don't want to go too big because it will look a little weird. We need to be roughly working around the same sort of size, and we can just go through and sort of add these parts in. Okay, as I said, it shouldn't take too long to sort of get to do this. Obviously working all the way across is a bit time consuming. Oh, phone's going off. Sorry about that. So it will probably ring again about 5 more times, so I'm just going to mute everything. Always the way as soon as you start making something. So right, so now we've sort of got that done, that first colour, we want to go on to the next colour, so let's make a new, we've just done that layer, sorry. Every time I click on the layers it always brings up that box, never quite get it where it needs to be. So BG, we'll call this yellow, create a new layer, see what I mean again, never gets it, BG orange, and this time we'll get orange and we'll add these in. So let's just zoom out a little, let's get our colour picker and we'll zoom in, and then we're going to start to paint these on. So obviously we need to just take this one underneath the yellow. Okay, so we're sort of losing a bit of this definition, but as I say, it just they all kind of sort of blend into each other, but we will at the end of this have you know, that sense of depth, that sense of distance. So don't worry too much if at this stage it doesn't look too much like what you're aiming for. We're going to create a new layer again, and we're going to call this one background purple, Then this time we are going to add a where are we? So we're going to create purple, so we get purple colour, and yeah, we're going to add this in. So we'll zoom back in, and we're just going to throw this behind, and then we're going to get some sort of cool looking bit of depth in there. So after this, we're going to start adding the trunks in, and we need to carry on this sense of going further back. Okay, so we'll just bring these in, and remember, go all the way to the edge. In fact, we'll just make that one big sort of tree at the back. That's fine. So cool. So the next stage, now we have the trees at the back, is to start thinking about adding the trunks in. So we're going to close these folders down, and we're going to follow the trees that we have in the foreground in terms of having purple. So what we're going to do is create a new folder, bring this down because it needs to be underneath, the trunks need to be underneath these trees, and we're going to call this trunks. Nice and easy. And inside that, we're going to create a new layout, and we're going to call this foreground. So what we want to do is give the sense that this is a thick forest that's really dense, has lots of trees and that which the light gets through. So anything that we see close to us will be lighter, and as we look further into it, it'll get darker. Okay, so we're going to sort of pick this colour for now. We're going to go to our brush settings, and we're going to turn off all of these that we've created. We're going to turn our brush up slightly to, maybe I should take that much further down than that, probably to about 15. Oh, so we'll just undo that, and then we'll go to 15. And we'll just start to paint, this idea that there are some tree trunks in there. It doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, these are going to be in the distance, probably covered up with the fence. We're probably not even going to see it all too well. Okay, but it all adds to the effect. And if some of you might want to create more like branches coming off, rather than just simply going up in one direction. So let's just bring this down. I can just sort of start painting these in. So I think that this tutorial is going to be into two parts. One part with this background, and then we're going to do another one with the house. Maybe we've got these sort of two just sort of coming away from each other, but quite close. Okay, so we've got our sort of first layer on. We're now going to add another layer, call this background, and place it further down, because it needs to be behind these ones. And this time we're going to go to our purple, and we're going to make it darker. Okay, and then this time we're going to add, try and fill in the space, even if there isn't a tree there. We're going to try and fill in the space, make it look like there is lots of trees behind. Okay, you may want to make the brush slightly smaller, but I'm not going to this time, just purely for the time's sake. But again, don't try and rush this process. Work that's rushed is it's very obvious it's been rushed. Okay, and you sort of lose on that quality, that attention to detail. So once we've got this sort of painted in, we can sort of zoom out a little bit. Okay, and we're starting to get that sense of depth. Now what we want to do is also paint what's very behind these black. Okay, what's all behind that in any of those gaps, so that it looks absolutely dense, and so we can't see anything. So it is really, really dark and dingy. Okay, so as you can see, the gaps in the trees where we've painted are starting to reveal themselves. That's perfectly fine to paint through them. Just adds a little bit more depth, which is perfectly fine. It creates that sense of shadow as well. So don't worry if you don't cover all the gaps down here, because we're going to paint some leaves on, similar to the foreground, just so it's blended in more accurately, and so they shouldn't show. So we're just going to quickly paint all that in. Obviously you'll do this all the way along. Okay, so at a later stage you might want to actually make these offset, so you can keep repeating the trees to save us having to keep painting out loads and loads and loads, but I mean, we'll discuss that when that time arrives. So again, we'll just call this darkness, because it literally is just darkness. Okay, so once we've got that in there, we need to start thinking about this ground. So we're going to create a new layer. We have this base background layer here, bring this up, actually sorry, no, underneath. We're going to bring this one down and create a new folder and just call this leaves ground, and we're going to copy these into there. Just make sure we've named everything. Remember, keep naming your files. I'm still seeing people not naming their layers, not having good management, and obviously that's going to impact the quality of the work. We're going to call these leaves ground. Okay, so again, because they're in the distance, we want to keep them really small, so about this size that we're working with, because they're falling off these trees, so they should be the same. So we're going to go take it back, I think it's on 11 before, we'll take it back to 11. We're going to take it now to this colour, okay, because we want it to look as though it's these, that it's the same, that they're the same thing. Now obviously, trees would normally that have shed their leaves to the floor wouldn't have them on the top, but since this is like a fantasy made up forest, I'm deciding that they constantly grow and die, and so there is forever a tree pattern on the floor. Okay, so again, we can start to just paint these in once we've done that. What I recommend is we keep this selected, so that we keep within these parameters. We may need to just tidy that up a little bit up afterwards. Okay, so we are painting exactly where we were before, and we are going to make this slightly darker as well. In fact, actually we'll break that off because we need to fill in these areas. So we'll just keep painting this on. Okay, so when we turn on our trees, it will look like that. Now obviously we are going to paint some additional parts on, okay, and actually these stumps look really quite big compared to what I did originally. Okay, so again, don't be afraid to move things around if you're not happy with them. I'm not sure I'm going to spend time erasing them because it's just time consuming. We can paint the ground back over them, okay, so we can just create a bigger brush. Go back to our original sort of background. That's the problem because this is over that, so we can take this, we can put them behind. There we go, that's better. Okay, we can still we can still paint over these slightly if we wish. Just to bring that out, we need to offset the brush. It's sticking together, so if we go to scattering, turn our no, not our count jitter. I do apologise. Not size jitter. I'm sure it was count jitter. No. Scatter, there we go. And it was one of these. Okay, yeah. Well, could not use brush tools. Yeah, okay. Okay, because we're going to fold up the layer. And now we need to go back up. And we're still not above the trunks. Okay, so actually what we can do is move these above the trunks. And move these ones back underneath. There we go, and then we can start to paint on the layer above. There we go, and start to not hide them away again. We will just bring up the twist in there, the angled jitter, I think it is. Yeah, just bring them slightly facing up again. It's okay if it's slightly not the same colour as before. We can. It's good to have a bit of variation. Breaks the design up. Obviously, there you go. So the other thing we're going to do as well today is adding a fence. But first, we're going to create this idea of depth and shadow behind all of these. Okay. I've obviously made a brush mark there, but for the sake of this demonstration, it doesn't matter. So we obviously want to create this idea of depth because at the moment they all look really flat. They're together, but they don't seem like they're further away. So what we're going to do is go to our brushes, Oh yeah, sorry, and one thing that I should have shown you last time with the tool is when you make a brush, you can save them. So if you've made your brush for this, and you'll get your go away, and you've got your presets all selected, you can go back to your brushes, you can go to this tool here, create the brush edge, capture the size, rename what you want, click OK. That should appear in your list, but while you've still got it selected, you'll need to go to edit, no sorry, go back to these brushes, and you need to go down here and save brushes. When you click save, you'll be able to save, like I have saved my one from earlier, and you'll be able to save them in here, and you'll be able to reopen them whenever you need them, okay, as I have with this wall, as you'll see soon. So firstly the shadows, so we can turn these off now, we don't need those effects. We've saved our brush, we can get it back if we need to, and we're going to go to basic brushes. We want to append, so we keep all the brushes that we've been working with, and we're going to go for a sort of around about 45 soft brush, 60 soft brush. Okay, and then we're going to select the colour black, and then we're going to go to the lead tree front, and then we're going to click a new layer, and we're just going to literally paint over like that. We're going to turn the opacity down, okay, to about sort of, what do we want, 40 I think it was. I may have had 150, we'll go 50. It doesn't matter if it comes down onto the front of the trees, because that's what we want. We want to create that idea of its depth, okay. So we're not really interested in painting anything behind these yet, because we're going to do that in another layer. So sorry, I've done this wrong. What we need to do is actually create this idea that these ones are at the front, or in different spaces. So we're going to create the tree front, and we're going to call this one yellow, tree yellow shadow. So tree yellow shadow, and then we'll be able to create this as with all the yellow ones here with a shadow. We'll take that down to 50%, okay, and we just want the yellow ones, okay, we don't want any of the others, and there's a really good reason for this, as you'll see shortly. And when we paint back over and we have these two layers where it's cut across, it will create that sense of, that additional sense of depth, okay. We're then going to go to pink, and we're going to try that one, tree, pink, shadow, and then we're going to sort of paint these on again, and we're going to take that down to 50%, okay. And now because we've got the shadow on this edge doubling up, we start to get this idea that they aren't exactly all matched up and lined up right on the edges of that forest, okay. And it's an additional way of making depth, of adding depth. Remember to do behind the trees, and again with the orange, we're going to call this one tree, orange, and shadow, okay. And then again we're going to start to paint these in. We're going to take that down to 50%, and we're going to start painting those on, okay. So again we're just getting that nice sort of depth adding to it, okay, and they're already starting to look as though they're falling behind each other. Now finally we need to do the trees in the background. So for this one we're not even going to do it in between all of them, we're just going to do one consistent shadow, because we don't need to show that they're not behind each other and in front of each other. These ones at the back just need to be shown that they're behind these ones at the front. So I'm going to create a new layer above them all, and we're going to call this one, if I can get to that, there we go, we're going to call this one shadow. It doesn't really matter about saying which trees it is, it's in that folder. So and now we're literally just going to come around to the edge, going on to 50%, and just sort of paint over these trees. Remember to leave the tops exposed as well, because this light's coming from here, so the tops need to have some visibility, some of that colour and shown beyond that depth, okay. To keep that effect there. So if we sort of take away now, look at that, we can actually see that these trees are behind each other, in front of each other, okay. So The next sort of stage that we want to do is create a barrier between us and this background. So again, as you can see on here, I've created this sort of fence. Okay, the idea being that it's kind of like roots of plants maybe that have been sort of dug up and tied up and used as a fence. So that's what we're going to do next. So again, we're going to sort of hide this tree just to make it easier to work from. I've missed a couple here. If you've missed them, please go back and do them. Obviously we don't want to get anything sort of caught up, and then so what we need to do is find our brush tool. Okay, and I'm just going to go and turn that off, and what we're going to do is okay, now my phone's ringing again. Oh, for God's sake, people need to go away when I'm working. So right, okay, where were we? So brush tool, and we're going to create a different type this time. So what we want to happen is the brush to tail off. So if we take our round brush, we want a solid brush. Okay, I'm going to create a layer because you can't actually see a preview of brush size without a layer because it's too busy stressing to you that you need to have a layer there. So we want it above the trees and we want it above the those, so we're going to go up and we'll just call this fence. Within fence we are going to create a new layer and we're going to call this main poles. Main poles, I don't know, something that we know is going to be the main sort of columns. So if we drew now, as you can see, we get a straight line. It's far too thick, so if you push the button next to P on the keyboard, it will shrink it down in tens and we get sort of look at what we want. Now the problem here is it doesn't tail off into a spike, and that's what we want to happen. So if we turn on our shape dynamics, we don't necessarily bother about size yet for now, but what we do want is a minimum diameter, and we don't want pen pressure. We want it to fade off. Okay, we want it to fade, and we need to decide the minimum length. I think I might have said sort of 30 before, and what we want to happen is we don't want this angle just what did I do before? So if we turn on 70, there we go. In fact, we can turn it off, and basically when every stroke I make now has a maximum, and we end up with this really cool sort of tailing off effect. Okay, so we're going to build our fence out of these. So they're looking a little long, so I'm going to take it down to 50. And hopefully if we do it from the edge of the perimeter, we should be able to see the trees quite nicely, as well as build that in. Okay, so what we're going to do is draw these on all the way along the edge. Okay, so it's going to go one every so often, and these are going to be our sort of main columns. So in fact, if these are our main ones, we are going to take this up slightly, take that up to 60. Okay, these are like our main rivets, sort of main poles that hold up the rest of the fence. Okay, so obviously we don't need them that close to each other, but we do need to show that they have some depth. Okay, so we're going to bring those up, and then we're going to bring hide this tree because it's in our way. Oh, and that's where we went to, so that's okay. So once we have these down, we want to start filling in betweens. Now you can be more expressive with these, as I have in certain areas where I've curled them round into like an S shape, you know. They will never sort of go around, and obviously you can make it more visually interesting that way. Another thing that we can do is, rather than having the same colour, which is black, I think that's a bit boring, we want it white. So for this time I'm going to just quickly select those, edit, fill, and white. Obviously you can push F5 if you want speed, and this time we want to add colour dynamics, and we're going to have the same sort of colour effects happening to us there, but we're going to change this to white just to keep sort of on the same page. I mean, look, some really cool looking kind of roots that have come out. Obviously each time there's a variation, and you know, we're starting to get some really interesting textures working with each other again, following on from the floor. So this time we're just going to take the size of those down to about 40 because they need to be a bit smaller. These additional panels, they're not as strong as those bigger ones, but obviously they have much more to them. And literally just follow around with your pen all the way through. Okay, and again just keep going round. We want to have these on a different layer as well, by the way, and I've completely messed that up. I do apologise. New layer, and just go additional poles, and then we can add these all the way in, going all the way along. Remember to take it all the way, because otherwise you're going to end up with some blunt. If you want to show more of a battle scene, maybe you do want to show like one area of somewhere that's been damaged in battle, like one section that's sort of like, you know, being sort of just damaged, and you can start to bring the rest of them back out. Okay, and obviously just keep doing it. It does take a little while just to go through them all, but the end result is worth it, as you can see from the one that I showed you before. Should be fairly easy to do this with a mouse, given that the lines aren't that long. Okay, and we can take this back underneath. So just as before as well, you can see now that we're starting to get this really cool looking situation happening. Yeah, and we'll obviously go behind this and all the way through. Get some really cool looking stuff. So what we're going to do is add the shadow to these as well, because remember our main light source is coming from here, so these need to be darker. So we're going to select that by pushing Control on the screen. Now if we push Control and Shift and the one above it, we'll select those as well, which means we don't have to do one layer and then another. And then above these we're just going to call this shadow, and we're going to go edit, and we're going to fill this with black, deselect, and in this layer we can turn the opacity right down on these. Okay, and just get them blended in with the background, just to make them look like that. Okay, if we wanted to do some kind of clever effects, we can select that whole layer, we can create a new layer to make a darker inner shadow. Okay, now what we can do is contract this whole selection. Okay, so all these marching ants will come inside slightly. So if we go to filter, select, then we can go modify, and we can go to contract. This contract will then suck that selection back in, obviously, but we don't want to do it with 5 pixels. So we're going to go to select, modify, contract, and I think probably 2 will be enough. And basically what this will do, if we go edit, fill, and we go black, okay, and obviously we can turn the opacity down again because we don't want it to be too dark. It will almost mimic that kind of the shadow, where the inside would be darker than the spikes on the outside. Obviously we would need to, if you select the whole layer while pushing Control, we need to add this shadow right in these bottoms, because they wouldn't be lit up. Okay, it's still drawing these effects, so we need to take those off. Okay, apologies for that. We just need to select. We need to select this layer, put on here, and then we can sort of paint those in. Yeah, there we go. We don't want the bottoms being lit up because the bottoms aren't light. Okay, just the sort of top edges. But even so, I still don't really like the effects. I think overall when we pull away, I still think it's a little bit too damaging on the rest of the image, and I think it might be a little bit too much going on for this sort of stage. So let's just do this and have a quick check. We can push Control H to hide the selection. Yeah, I mean it's okay, but I don't like it at all. So we can turn that off, and we can just keep that, and we can always add more shadow later on. So cool. So for the this is sort of in between the weeks. So this is between the brush, a continuation of the brush tutorial that we did last week. But again, we're going to look at the pen tool again in the next tutorial. As you can see, you know, very quickly we can build up this idea of depth and location and atmosphere, as we're going to do in the next tutorial. So I hope to see you there. I hope your work's looking good, and as ever, I can't wait to see the results. Thank you.